Imagine for a second that you're walking down this just stunning, totally picture-perfect city street.
Oh, like one of those European cobblestone streets.
Right, exactly. We're talking cobblestones, these charming little cafes, and, the afternoon lighting is hitting the brickwork just right. It feels incredibly authentic and lived in.
Yeah, totally vibrant.
But then you just casually lean your shoulder against one of those solid-looking brick walls, and the entire structure wobbles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you walk around to the back of the building and you realize um, there's no building at all. It's literally just plywood, some scaffolding, and strategically placed sandbags.
Right, because the facade is, well, it's engineered to look absolutely flawless from that one specific angle on the street.
Exactly.
But there is zero structural depth behind it. You've basically just walked onto a Hollywood backlot.
Yeah.
But until you physically tested the boundaries of that environment, like by actually leaning on the wall, you entirely believed it was a real, functional city.
And man, it is deeply disorienting when that illusion breaks. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are going to be leaning on a lot of walls today to see what wobbles.
We definitely are.
We are unpacking a truly compelling and honestly intellectually urgent article from Bibebibebibe Magazine. It's titled Living in Low Reality Levels, a Philosophical and Practical Critique.
It's a fantastic piece.
It really is. And I want to pose a question directly to you, the listener. What if your daily life, like your internet feed, the food in your pantry, your understanding of your own country's economy, what if all of that is actually a highly curated simulation?
And we should clarify, we aren't talking about putting on some bulky sci-fi virtual reality headset here.
Right, no VR goggles. We are talking about the physical waking world that you navigate every single day.
It's a profound question to ask yourself.
Yeah.
And to understand exactly what the authors are getting at, we first have to establish the core concept they introduce, which is the low reality level.
Yeah, let's define that.
So a low reality level is not a glitch in a computer program. It's not a literal matrix we're plugged into. It is an environment, and that could be a physical space, a digital ecosystem, or even a cultural narrative, where your perception is structurally bounded and controlled.
Bounded and controlled. So what does that actually look like for the person inside it?
Well, the defining characteristic is that it provides you with only partial access to the truth. You are given just enough coherence to keep you compliant and comfortable.
But not enough to see the whole picture.
Exactly. Not enough raw data to see the scaffolding holding the whole system up.
It is a massive concept, and, we have a dense, really fascinating journey ahead of us today.
We do.
So here is the blueprint. We're going to start by looking at the philosophical roots of this trap, right? Connecting ancient thought to modern media theory. Then we're going to examine the actual mechanisms of how these low reality levels function today.
Like in our phones and our food.
Yes, specifically in the algorithms on your phone and the aisles of your grocery store. And finally, we're going to explore how this scales up to entire national cultures. And most importantly, how you can actually break the frame and access a higher reality.
Right. And to understand how our perceptions are so effectively managed today, we really must look at the intellectual foundation first. Because the blueprint for this trap, it wasn't drawn up in Silicon Valley.
No, definitely not.
The roots go back thousands of years.
Right. The article naturally invokes Plato's cave, but it updates that allegory for the modern era.
Yes, the classic cave.
Right. And we can assume most listeners are familiar with the basic premise. Prisoners chained in a cave, mistaking the shadows of objects on the wall for actual reality.
Because it's literally the only sensory input they've ever known.
Exactly. But the authors argue that we aren't staring at crude shadows of puppets on a rock wall anymore. We are staring at pixel-perfect, AI-generated composites of reality.
Which makes the illusion infinitely harder to break.
Yeah.
The shadows have gotten a massive upgrade.
Oh, totally.
And the text connects this ancient idea to a vital concept from the 20th century, which is the French sociologist Jean Baudrillard's theory of hyperreality.
Oh, okay. Yes. Hyperreality.
Baudrillard argued that in an advanced media society, signs and representations eventually replace the underlying reality entirely.
Replace it entirely.
Yes. It reaches a point where an advertisement or a metric or a symbol, it becomes more real and more important to us than the actual human experience it's supposed to represent.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I really want to make sure we grasp the mechanism of how a sign replaces a reality.
Sure.
Think about it like looking at a highly edited travel influencer's photo on your phone.
Hmm.
You see this perfectly curated, color-corrected square of a beach.
Oh, yeah, the impossibly blue water.
Exactly. The water is an impossible shade of blue, the sand is pristine, there are no crowds anywhere. Now, the mechanism of hyperreality isn't just that the photo is fake, it's that the photo becomes the standard for the beach. So when you actually travel there and experience the messy reality, the seaweed, the crowds, the unpredictable weather, you view the real beach as a disappointment.
Wow. Yeah.
The representation has successfully hijacked and replaced the actual location in your hierarchy of truth.
That is the perfect distillation of hyperreality. The map has literally replaced the territory. And, what's fascinating here is how the article takes this synthesis of Plato and Baudrillard and argues that it leads directly to what they term simulation theory.
Right, and as we established earlier, the source is very careful to distinguish this from the literal science fiction idea of a simulated universe.
Yes.
We aren't brains in vats generating electricity for robot overlords.
No robots here. It is a sociological simulation. It's that governments, massive corporations, and algorithmic platforms are actively simulating reality by bounding your perception.
Bounding your perception.
Right. They are constructing the parameters of your world so seamlessly and with such high-definition representations that you just don't realize you are operating within a heavily edited environment.
You just mistake the frictionless interface for the chaotic totality of the real world.
Exactly. And the article summarizes this with a phrase that kind of serves as the thesis for the whole piece. They write, signs replace truth, shadows replace light, illusions replace reality.
Illusions replace reality. That is heavy.
It is.
It shifts us from thinking about things like fake news or, misleading marketing as just mere nuisances to realizing they represent a foundational restructuring of how we interact with the world.
Completely.
Which brings us to the practical application, because now that we understand the philosophical mechanism of hyperreality, let's look at how these high-definition shadows are projected onto the walls of our daily lives.
Yes, the day-to-day mechanisms.
And the source starts with our mental diet, the digital architecture of the internet.
Right. The article details real-world mechanisms of this phenomenon, beginning with internet filtering. And it takes a very broad structural view here to demonstrate how low reality levels function.
Yeah, it makes a really bold comparison.
It does. It explicitly compares two systems that we typically view as complete opposites. Right. So China's Great Firewall and U.S. algorithmic curation.
Wait, here's where it gets really interesting. Because my immediate instinct is to push back hard on that comparison.
A lot of people do, yeah.
Right. I mean, isn't there a massive fundamental difference between strict state-mandated censorship, where a government actively uses network infrastructure to block access to specific political realities, and a social media algorithm that I personally interact with?
Oh,
because, I choose who I follow, I click what I like, the algorithm is just reacting to my choices to show me more of what I already want. So doesn't that make my feed an expression of my actual reality rather than a top-down simulation?
It is a crucial point. And the feeling of agency you were describing, that is exactly why algorithmic curation is such an effective low reality level.
Oh.
You are absolutely right that the intent behind the two systems is fundamentally different. Like, state censorship uses a data vacuum to maintain political control.
Right.
While an algorithm uses data abundance to maximize user engagement and drive advertising revenue. But the article asks us to look purely at the structural outcome for the human mind inside the system.
Okay, walk me through the outcome then. How does my quote-unquote choice lead to a simulation?
Because your choices are being processed by a machine learning model designed to eliminate friction.
Friction meaning things I don't want to see.
Yes. If you show an interest in a specific political viewpoint or a certain lifestyle, the algorithm doesn't just show you that. It begins to actively suppress counter-narratives, nuance, and complexity because those things cause cognitive friction.
And friction makes users close the app.
Exactly. So the algorithm creates a feedback loop, feeding you increasingly concentrated, purified versions of your own preferences. And over time, it constructs this synthetic, hermetically sealed reality around you. It bounds your perception just as effectively as a firewall, but it does it through a surplus of tailored information rather than a scarcity of it.
I see. So while the state censor builds a brick wall to keep information out, the algorithm builds a hall of mirrors to keep me staring at my own reflections.
That's a great way to put it.
But either way, the mechanism results in me losing access to the broader, messier truth. My reality has been bounded without me even realizing it.
Precisely. And if these systems are so incredibly effective at feeding our minds a frictionless synthetic version of reality, it naturally forces us to look at the other inputs in our lives.
Right, our physical inputs.
Yes. The article makes a brilliant pivot here, transitioning from the digital space to the physical world, specifically the grocery store aisle. It argues that our modern food systems operate on the exact same hyperreal mechanics.
This part of the article was just fascinating to me, because if the algorithm is an invisible filter bubble, the grocery store is a highly visible one.
It's everywhere.
The source points specifically to how heavily processed foods are marketed, using words like premium, natural, or artisanal. But it's not just about deceptive labeling, is it? It's about hacking our biology.
Exactly. We can think of modern processed food as a biological deepfake.
A biological deepfake.
Yes. To understand the mechanism here, you have to look at how flavor engineering works. Over millions of years, our bodies evolved sensory receptors on our tongues to detect nutritional reality.
So like sweetness signaled dense calories or specific aromas signaled vitamins.
Right. Our tongue is essentially a data-gathering instrument testing the environment.
Okay, that makes sense.
But modern food science has isolated the specific volatile chemical compounds that trigger those evolutionary sensors, completely divorcing the flavor from the underlying nutrition.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When you eat a heavily processed premium strawberry snack, flavor engineers have synthesized the exact chemical signature of a ripe strawberry. Your evolutionary sensors are triggered, sending a massive signal to your brain that vital, life-sustaining nutrients are arriving.
But the payload is empty.
Entirely empty. When that food hits your stomach, the biological data, the actual vitamins, minerals, and complex fibers, is completely absent. You are consuming the Baudrillardian sign of a strawberry.
I was just thinking about an analogy for this. It's like buying a beautiful cardboard box that has been meticulously painted to look like a gourmet meal.
Yes.
The sign of excellence is there on the outside, right? It looks incredible, but when you open it up, the actual nourishment is completely absent. You are just eating painted cardboard.
That's exactly it. You are experiencing the hyperreality of nutrition while your cellular reality remains completely malnourished. The marketing and the chemical flavoring have created a simulation of excellence that overrides the physical truth of the food.
That is incredibly insidious when you break down the mechanics of it. You are literally paying a premium to have your own evolutionary biology hacked.
You really are.
And the source argues that this architecture of illusion, it doesn't stop at our news feeds or our dinner plates. This is where the deep dive really expands, because the article scales this concept all the way up to macro-level social structures.
To the level of entire nations.
Right. We are talking about how entire nations and cultures construct low reality levels.
This is perhaps the most ambitious part of the critique. The authors explain how cultural and national narratives function using the exact same mechanisms as the algorithm and the flavor engineer.
Okay, how so?
Well, entire nations, regardless of their specific political or economic systems, they advertise themselves to their citizens as bastions of absolute freedom or unyielding engines of prosperity. And they do this by substituting hyperreal metrics for lived reality.
Okay, let's dig into how a nation actually simulates reality for its citizens. Because it's not just about putting up a billboard that says everything is great.
No, it's much more sophisticated than that. Consider how nations use macroeconomic indicators. Things like gross domestic product or the stock market index. These are just metrics. They're abstractions.
Right, just numbers on a page.
But through constant media repetition and political messaging, the metric becomes the reality. If the stock market is at an all-time high, the hyperreal narrative broadcast to the citizens is that the economy is flawless and prosperity is universal.
But that hyper-real narrative completely masks the underlying structural truth. I mean, the stock market might be booming, but real wages might be stagnant, the physical infrastructure might be crumbling, and the cost of living might be suffocating the average person.
Exactly. But if the narrative of the metric is loud enough, it serves as a low reality level. It bounds the perception of the public.
So the map is overriding the territory again.
Yes. When the GDP says everything is perfect, the territory, which is the lived experience of the citizens, is actively ignored or treated as an anomaly.
Wow.
The cultural narrative is a heavily curated simulation designed to conceal deep, systemic flaws and maintain social compliance. The nation is essentially projecting a flawless, high-definition shadow onto the wall of the cave so you don't turn around and look at the decaying infrastructure right behind you.
So what does this all mean? I want to push on this a bit because if I'm playing devil's advocate here,
Go for it.
if the algorithm gives me a frictionless day and the biological deepfake food tastes chemically perfect and the national narrative gives me a sense of pride and stability, what is the actual danger? Why not just accept the simulation? Why not just stay in the cave if the shadows are highly entertaining and comfortable?
It is the ultimate temptation of the modern age, just the desire to sink into the frictionless simulation.
Sure.
But the source issues a stark, uncompromising warning against this.
Okay.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, living in a curated social simulation is not a neutral state. It is an active state of decay.
Because if the map replaces the territory is left to rot.
Precisely. The article argues that when illusions are consistently mistaken for the truth, profound systemic degradation occurs. Let's look at the mechanisms we just discussed.
Okay.
If you live on biological deepfakes, your sensory experience is highly stimulated, but your physical health slowly degrades from metabolic malnutrition.
Right.
If you live inside an algorithmic feedback loop, your engagement is constantly rewarded, but your intellect and your capacity for complex, critical thought slowly degrades from a lack of cognitive friction.
And on the macro level, if a culture relies entirely on public relations and hyperreal metrics rather than an authentic shared reality, the actual foundation of the society degrades. I mean, you can't fix a crumbling bridge with a good PR campaign.
Exactly. The danger is a slow, silent atrophy. You don't realize you are starving if your brain is constantly being told you are eating steak.
Oh, that's a great point.
And don't realize your society is decaying if you are constantly fed metrics of unprecedented success. The curated frame pacifies you while the reality collapses.
That is a deeply sobering realization because it implies that right now, simply by passively going with the flow of modern life, we are actively participating in our own degradation.
Yes, we are.
We are accepting the low reality levels because they are just the default settings of our environment, which naturally leads to the most urgent question of this entire deep dive. How do we break the frame? If we realize we are standing on the Hollywood backlot, how do we actually find the exit?
This is where the article provides tremendous value, shifting from a philosophical critique to tangible, practical application. The authors argue that escaping the simulation requires deliberate, mechanical disruption.
Disruption.
Yes. You cannot passively wait for reality to present itself because the systems around you are optimized to hide it. You have to actively expose yourself to the friction of alternative systems.
And the source outlines specific tools for this disruption, primarily focusing on travel and rigorous critical inquiry. But they are very specific about what kind of travel actually works.
Yes, this is a vital distinction. Escaping a low reality level isn't achieved by booking a week at a curated, all-inclusive resort in another country.
Because an all-inclusive resort is just another hyper-real environment.
Exactly. It's a projection of what the host country thinks the tourist wants to see. It is perfectly safe, frictionless, and totally disconnected from the socioeconomic reality of the local population.
Right. The resort is literally just another cave with different shadows on the wall.
Exactly. True travel, as the article defines it, involves inserting yourself into the uncurated, functional reality of another culture.
Like taking public transit.
Yes, when you navigate a foreign public transit system or interact with local markets outside the tourist zones, you experience profound cognitive dissonance. You see how different societies solve the exact same human problems using entirely different systems and values.
Yeah.
This raises an important question mechanically. What happens in your brain when you experience that?
Well, it provides massive structural contrast. It forces you to realize that your way of life isn't the natural, inevitable default. It's just one constructed system among many.
Yes.
I like to think about the mechanism of this like walking out of a movie theater. Imagine you've been sitting in a dark theater for hours, right?
Okay, yeah.
You are completely absorbed in the world on the screen, the narrative, the lighting, the stakes. That is your entire bounded reality. But then as credits roll, you push open those heavy exit doors and you step outside into the blinding, chaotic midday sun.
The transition is a physical shock to the system.
It is. You have to physically squint. The light almost hurts for a second. The noise of the street is overwhelming. But that mechanical shock of context switching instantly shatters the spell of the curated movie screen.
Right. You wake up.
Exactly. You suddenly remember the broader context. Like, right, I was just sitting in a dark room looking at projections. True travel and rigorous critical inquiry act as that blast of midday sun. They provide the necessary friction to wake you up from the simulation.
That is a perfect visualization of the process. And critical inquiry functions the exact same way intellectually. It isn't just about reading more books. It's about learning how to test the structural integrity of the narratives you are handed.
It's the active habit of leaning against the brick walls of your worldview to see if they wobble.
Yes, it's asking things like, who benefits from me believing this metric?
Yeah.
Or what physical reality does this buzzword actually represent?
It's demanding the friction that the algorithms and the marketers are trying to design away.
Exactly.
So let's take a step back and look at the incredible map we've drawn today. We started deep in the philosophical bedrock, using Plato's cave and Baudrillard's hyperreality to understand how easily human perception is hijacked when signs replace substance.
Right.
We then drag that philosophy into the light of our daily lives, examining the specific mechanics of how algorithmic feedback loops create synthetic digital realities, and how flavor engineering creates biological deepfakes in our grocery aisles.
With that painted cardboard box of a meal.
Exactly. And finally, we look at how entire nations use hyperreal metrics to mask systemic decay, trapping us in a comfortable but degrading social simulation.
It can absolutely feel overwhelming to analyze your life through this lens and realize how heavily managed our default existence really is.
It really can.
But the crucial, empowering takeaway for you, the listener, is that the architecture of these low reality levels relies entirely on your passive acceptance. The simulation only works if you never test the boundaries.
Right.
By actively utilizing the tools of uncurated travel, deep structural education, and relentless critical inquiry, you possess the capacity to pierce the facade. You can introduce the necessary friction to dismantle the simulation in your own life and access a higher, more authentic reality.
We do not have to settle for the plywood backlot. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, lingering thought to explore as you go about the rest of your day. The next time you reach for a visually perfect premium product off a store shelf, or the next time you find yourself effortlessly scrolling through a frictionless, perfectly curated media feed, take just one physical second to pause. Ask yourself, are you consuming reality, or are you just eagerly consuming the marketing simulation? If you were to strip away all the packaging, all the targeted behavioral loops, and all the cultural narratives, what actual tangible substance would be left in your hands? Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Keep leaning on those walls.